All right, let's get into deserts. So this is a really cool picture of a desert. I like this picture of the desert. It shows what are there not a lot of?
Trees.
Not a lot of trees. Yeah. What is there a lot of?
Grass.
You get a very good picture of non-living organisms. There's a bunch of rocks that are very visible. Now there could be a lot of rocks in the rainforest, but they're going to be covered in plants, so you can't see them as easily. But in the desert, you're going to see those things because it's just a very harsh environment. Let's go. So hot and dry with a variety of plants and animals. Why would hot be in parentheses? It is.
Because it's cold at night.
So the desert is going to be very, very dry. All deserts are dry. Most deserts are hot. So we're going to write that down. All deserts are dry. Most deserts are hot. So there are some deserts that actually have snow on the ground because they are they're very, very cold, and the snow doesn't like sink down. So if you think about rain, if you put rain in the desert, throw a bucket of water in the desert, that water is going to go straight through the ground, or it's going to run off and go downhill. It's not going to just sit there on top of the sand. Whereas if you were to put a bucket of ice, like a block of ice, in a cold desert, that ice is going to stay there year round until it cools off enough until it warms up enough to melt. So some deserts, there's actually snow on the ground. On planet Earth, there's the old planet Earth. There's some camels that have actually that they follow around. And you can see that they're going through snow. They're in the desert, but there's snow on the ground in some places, and it's there, and it's been there for a long time because it can't go anywhere else unless the wind blows it somewhere. It's not going to get warm enough to melt, or it hasn't yet in that video. Animals are most active at night. This makes them nocturnal. So nocturnal means they're active at night. Nocte, noct. The Latin word, or if you know some Spanish or another romantic language, noct is night. Dia or di, di or dia is day. So nocturnal is active during the night. What is active during the day? Diurnal. Diurnal. So animals are most active at night. Why would they be active at night? Think through that. It is very hot during the day. A lot of evaporation happening during the day because of the sun heating things up, and it's very cool at night, actually to the point where it may be uncomfortable to us. So they're active at night so that they can not have to deal with the sun. Flowers are nocturnal as well. There's some flowers here that are nocturnal. If you go outside at night and you have the flowers, you'll see them bloom. They're weeds. You'll see them blooming only at night. When the morning comes, sun rises up, it dries the flowers out, and they shrivel up. Same thing happens here in the desert, but it happens more commonly than where we are. This biome has the least amount of rainfall. The defining characteristic of a desert is it's dry, which means it has very little rainfall. It's dry. The defining characteristic is that it's dry. So plants and animals here are highly adapted. Now, just to be fair, all places have animals that are adapted to it and plants that are adapted to it. But these are animals and plants that we would define as probably weird or strange looking. Things like a horny toad, the horned toad, like it's got horns all over it. Looks like a prickly, but looks like a cactus lizard. Then you've got cacti, pretty obvious. We don't normally come across cacti very often, especially things like the saguaro cactus, which could be 150, 200 years old. It's got pricklies all over it. It's got holes all over it. Thorns all over it because it's doing what? Defending itself. What is it defending?
It's water.
Water. It's got a water source. It's got roots that can go into the ground and absorb the water when it rains, and it's got to defend that. Otherwise, something else is going to come around it. It can't defend itself by hitting it or running away. So it's got to come up with some other defense. Some of them defend themselves by, like some cacti, I don't know if it's saguaro, but some cacti, the liquid that they store, even if we're smart enough to use a stick or something to get away the thorns away, we still can't drink it because it adds some kind of chemical that is poisonous to us. So some cacti we can drink from, some cacti we can't, but it'll be bad. So animals and plants here are highly adapted. Rainfall, less than 25 centimeters. Remember that, less than 25 centimeters. If you get more than 25 centimeters, you're kind of getting into the grassland. More than 75 centimeters, you're getting into the deciduous forest, if the temperature is right. You can see deserts a lot in northern Africa and Australia. I want to point out that some of these areas were not always desert. Some of these areas were very lush. Over time, through different means, humans have kind of removed the fertility from that area by overpopulation in that area or poor management practices, like the way that we continue to pull from the earth for farming, and we're not putting back. It's a type of mining. It's not really farming. Farming is when you give back to the earth, and it's a relationship back and forth. You're helping the ground, and the ground is helping you. What we've done, like in places like in Egypt and the Fertile Crescent, is we've kind of more so mined. We've taken, and eventually those resources run out. Here's some examples. Here's that lizard I was telling you about. Jackrabbit, big old ears. Fox, again, large ears. Got a cactus with pricklies all over, and this bird can actually burrow into the saguaro. You get different snakes. Roadrunner, a camel. Do you know what's in the hump of this camel?
Water.
Not water. It's actually fat. It's not water, but they do tend to go pretty long distances without resupplying water compared to other animals. It's actually fat. Now that fat, I'm not sure that fat may help store water, but it is mostly fat. That's why when you sit on it, it doesn't just like act like a water balloon and go somewhere else, like plop somewhere else. All right. Fighting desertification. So here's an implement that I saw online. I'll go through this really quickly. We may watch this video later. It talks about how you can making a dam in 1930s, and the 1930s actually creates a forest in the middle of the desert today. So you have this implement. If you go through, this implement run over the sand, it's going to make little divots. Now, when it rains in the desert, a lot of times that water will not actually go into the ground. It'll actually just run off because it's called what's called being hydrophobic. Hydrophobic, which means it's afraid of water. And so what this does is these little pools, you may see this if you have a plant that you're not watering in a while, you put water on it and the water just beads right off of it. If you soak that plant in water, then the water becomes hydrophilic, which means that it will absorb water. It loves water. So doing this to the desert makes this water group up in these little pools. And eventually plants can start growing. Seeds that are already there can start growing. They can start sprouting. And so simple things like running this over an area can turn an area that's pretty rough to an area that's not so rough. Resembles more of a grassland. So this is an example of fighting desertification. You've talked about that in social studies, or you're about to talk about that in social studies, I believe. And then we get to the tundra. So the desert is its main quality is what? What's its defining characteristic? Very little what? Rainfall. Mostly hot. Most of them are hot, but the defining characteristic is very little rainfall.